The topic of the evening is dressing with authenticity. We had just released earlier, 7 days ago, in fact, we released the podcast
Oh,
episode where Spencer and I talk about authenticity, what it means to dress authentically, particularly in the realm of first, number one, getting into menswear, like, as a style, like, oh, I don't know if the style's for me. And then number two, expanding once you've gotten into menswear, like, oh, I couldn't wear that because that's not me, but then about a specific item. We talk about how that relates to everything. We also talk about how does authenticity matter for the job you have or the lifestyle you have? How does that inform what you think is authentic? And how others can perceive you. So it's a good episode. It's on all platforms. You can watch it also on YouTube if this is where you're watching this stuff. Um, there's also an essay that I wrote that kind of going along with it that I kind of talk about my own perspective about authenticity and how it applies, in my particular mindset, I guess. And today we're going to be talking with a couple of our friends in the Discord, just general conversation. If you guys have any points for us to talk about authenticity, leave it in the chat. We will get to you. We will make sure that we mention you. But yeah, I mean, why don't we talk? We'll talk with Matt here first because Matt, as we've discussed, I think earlier in the pod or in the streams, Matt comes from a theater background and everything. We have the uh was it Pirates or Gothic? What was it? Was it Pirates that got
I was in
you?
a pirate play. What happened? Which one are we talking about?
No, I was talking about like earlier when you were getting into it. Like, what was your lead in? Like, it was Sherlock
Oh,
Holmes, right? Like that's
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah. That kind of.
Victorian. There we go.
Well, yeah, it's the idea of just like wanting to get details. Like even early on, just like if I wanted to do a costume, I wanted to do it right. So back when I was like, okay, if I wanted to dress like a Slytherin student, I wanted to go through Lockhaven. I wanted to get the wizarding tie and robe. I didn't want to half-ass it. So very early on, even removed from style, I had this idea that I wanted to. It's supposed to look right. They wear the charcoal pants and an off-white shirt. I didn't want it just half-ass it. So even removed from style, if I was just with any kind of clothing, and that, yes, that went into Victorian stuff, but just that idea of wanting it to, look the part. Because I couldn't make it. I wasn't someone who's like goes to these cons and make their own things. I'm not that crafty. I'm not that skilled. But if I could
Right.
find the right pieces to look close enough, that I'd be
So
happy.
do
That was good enough
do
for
you
me.
think that the details part is that what makes it like authentic to you? Like, do you find like that now when you're creating an outfit, like it doesn't feel right until it has the details of whatever it is the person you're trying to be?
Yeah,
Because
because
I think
it's
that the
like,
rest of us kind of do that in a
yeah.
sense.
And it's like my tailoring that doesn't have, natural, well, not really shoulders is an issue, but like the three roll two. If I have like an olive cotton suit, oh, but it's two button. Like there's pieces that are missing that aren't holistically like my perfect thing. So I guess that's a version of like, oh, is this the most authentic thing I can wear? But it's just a thing that I have for now. So I guess that's a version of it where I you adapt basically things you have to just fit your narrative and just like, okay, well, I have this for now and this I
Right.
can wear it in this way that justifies it. Now that does weed things out. If I find something in my closet that I can't justify, it's not close enough, it's not meeting the bar of authentic, then if I in which is more the more likely situation is I just don't wear it and it just sits there and I realize, oh, I haven't worn this in a year because I haven't been able to justify it because it doesn't flow with my current vibe, basically. So it's natural selection in a way.
Natural selection of your wardrobe. I
Indeed.
love it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm so uh can you tell us like can you expand on like what authenticity or dressing authentic means to you?
Yeah, it's just being able to, I mean, it's with anyone getting into clothing or just like, and even not clothing, just finding parts of their personality or like we try things out, try to form these identities, but it's a thing if you try something and it doesn't resonate with you or you feel trapped or you feel wrong in it. Like so many people, I'm sure you'll talk about in the corporate thing, these people who don't like tailoring or clothing, they feel trapped in these monkey suits. It's not authentic to them. So if I'm wearing something, if I'm trying something out, and I don't like it, it might take some convincing. Like I think earlier on, I was so into the idea of Ivy that I couldn't imagine doing like a workwear or anything like that. Just totally did not
Interesting.
see me. Yeah,
Mm.
early on, it was just like that was not as interesting. And granted, I really don't do a whole lot of that now, but I appreciate it. I can understand it, and I can borrow things. Like or I just don't have the pieces, but I'd love to do like a dark sawtooth, all these things. But So it's hard. You have to try things, but you also have to recognize, okay, what you recognize the sensations you feel when you try things on, like, oh, I really like this, and then just playing with what you're comfortable in, but not settling, which you talk a lot about. So it's a
Yeah,
balancing act between the
defaulting.
two. The defaulting, and I think there is
Yeah,
like a difference between like a while ago I talked to you guys about like, oh, what if I just got a wardrobe that was like based off of her, whereas like these like belt looped high waisted pants and these like Peter Manning button downs, and I just had versions of that and I just wore that as like a basic. And you said that at the time, you're like, oh, so sort of like a basic thing, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think of it like that, but I think I was, and in a way I am into the idea of just like a not a uniform, but just like if I could have all my tailoring that just have mostly the same details, I sort of love that. Now they'd have different weights and seasons and all that, but there's a part of me that still enjoys a little bit of that, but not to that extent. So you don't want to default, but because you want to be open to try new things. But I think
right.
it's healthy and just necessary acknowledging. Oh, I really
How
like
d
this.
What made you try new things? What makes you go for you going from, well, that's not me to, oh, I can take this piece of it.
I think it's just continuing to learn and continuing to look at what other people are doing. I was set on my wedding tie being a navy knit white dot because I wanted that tie so bad, and I finally got to do it. And then I think it was probably, yeah. I think you had like a foulard in one of like your sad head Saturdays, and you're like, you know what? I have a foulard. I should just wear that for the wedding, and I think it worked out. So that's a small example, but I think just like looking at people you admire, like if I see Matthew Woodruff wearing something that I own a similar version of, or I hadn't thought of wearing it like that. Again, I don't have to. This is kind of contradicting what I said up top about authenticity. You don't need always to find these exact pieces, and I've said that before. You don't need to find the exact things. You can approximate. But if you see something, then it can inspire you to wear something similar to it, which might lead you down a path of getting something new. So yeah, it's exposing yourself to a lot of different things, like people putting on menswear, and not
Don't want to
just
expose
shutting your.
myself to people.
No, you shouldn't. I mean, now you can because things are a little more open, but I'd
Yeah.
still find a limit, Spencer. But I think that uh, not staying in a bubble, it's hard. If you find a thing you like, there's a temptation to just stay there, and I think some of us do that. Like, and that's not unhealthy to do that to a certain extent, but I think it's nice to continuing to feed your imagination and explore and learn,
Right.
and just not and just understand that as you get older you will evolve in your style, hopefully, or just in lots of things, and opinions will change and you'll
I mean,
find new avenues.
most people who are resistant to trying new things or have this kind of narrow view of authenticity. I think I said this in either in the blog or in the podcast. Maybe I didn't say it at all, but it's usually people who are in college who have this like kind of this idea that they can't be too loud, like, oh, I still got to go to job interviews or whatever. Or it's people who have just never had like the reason to like wear anything other than a t-shirt and pants. So it is hard to get into that mindset of what you said, like, when you like a lot of different things, it makes it easier. But the thing is, you have to like a lot of different things.
Hmm.
That's the
And
tough
yeah,
part.
right. And like it's still
Right.
with like tailoring as the extreme, that still seems completely detached in my opinion. Like they no, that doesn't even enter into
Ri-
it, that, oh, I can make this part of
Right.
my look. That's just the monkey suit to get the
Right.
job and all that.
Menswear, yeah, menswear has classic menswear or tailoring specifically has this kind of weird limbo area where like, well, it can't be fashion because it's classic and I can only wear
Uh-huh.
it to certain events.
But
It's
then
really hard to
there's that middle
stand.
ground where it's like, "Oh, do I try the vest?" They
Mm.
like, they
Yeah,
question
then
these things,
they find
these little
they have
things. Yeah.
exactly. It is weird. Um, but before we move on, so how do we when you wear something like not just authentic to like your taste and what you like, but how do you find that your job or the fact that you are in the arts, specifically music, factors into the things that you do? Do you think it you subvert it with how you dress, or do you think that the way you dress makes sense? Like it seems like an authentic extension of yourself.
It's a good question because it's like a lot of these people I see perform, they're just like it can it's one way or the other. It's like it looks like just a shitty mall suit, or they like usually not as many Western people, but just like very extravagant paisley tuxedo, just like over the top. So it's like, why can't I just bring this kind of these somewhat Ivy sensibilities into it, where it's like ideally I'd still like to probably just perform in worsted. Like not that I can't perform in needlecord and all the stuff that I have now, but just you're making things a little easier on myself. But after that, after just making fabric a little bit easier and maybe more sober, again, sober fabrics and colors and patterns, but still having those similar cuts that I enjoy that I wear and all that, and still getting away with it, like having again kind of that silhouette, and maybe again more textured tie, not just a straight up white spread collar shirt. Finding ways that
Right.
I can incorporate, and but it is differentiating. Like I would much rather have like an evening of performing in a worsted and those details I just described, but then like if I wanted to wear tailoring that day, like skip the tie and just like wear like a again like a corduroy suit and just like with a t-shirt or a crew neck or something like that. And again, it's playing with those contrasts. It's important to me as someone who does perform. I think about that a little bit. And not performing all the time. We're only just getting out of the woods with COVID, but it is something I'm conscious of even now. Just like how do I draw those distinctions? Yeah,
Right. That's when you talk about the other musicians, I feel like the one big thing is like, well, it can't be authentic to me because I need to be focused on my art form, right?
yeah,
Oh, I want to. It's the Steve Jobs thing, right?
right.
We're like, oh, because my mind is focused on so much other stuff, I can't possibly think about
Where it's
fashion.
defaulting to the nth degree, where it's like, yeah, like my director just like got his choir tux in undergrad and just wears that as his tuxedo. Never thought
Right.
about it again afterwards,
No,
and he's like 40s,
I
50s.
Right. I think yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense where like, when you're in that world or anything that kind of has this kind of, you know, fashion seems to be too extra. I can't get into it.
Right.
I think what helps, and of course it's not common, but when people when people with authentic like hobbies and passions and careers are able to mix in menswear, I feel like that helps the idea that you can still be a fully functioning adult and in your career, whether you're a teacher, uh, a union like electrical engineer, I think is what Peter Zotolo urban composition is.
Hmm.
You can be an English professor, you can be all these, you can be like Laird McIntosh, right, who played Phantom on
Yeah,
Broadway for a while. Like, yeah, he has to work on his art, and he's a fantastic dresser, right? There's a lot of painters, I mean, even now, like Fab Gorajan, who does the stuff for like Fox Brothers now that you guys have
sure.
seen, and you know, there are plenty of people who are as like who probably like their art and focus on their art a lot more, but they still have the mental capacity to do other stuff because they just like it, And I
Yeah,
think, I was just gonna say, like, if you recognize that you like a certain way of dress, there is a way to do it. Like, there
right.
is absolutely a way to figure out how to make it work within
And
the
not
context.
to tie back to the topic, but it's just like at the very least, you don't have to be as into it as all of us. But if you get to the point where you at least know, like you can feel comfortable in what you're
Yeah,
wearing, and so especially as a performer, where it's like, okay, like again, you don't need to be as into it as all of us, but like just so you can go out there and be comfortable in your skin and not fidget with like buttons and like sleeve lengths, and you could just
right,
live in your clothing like we talked about, and that authenticity can come through and not be another factor that they're fearing about performance, about the clothes getting in the way of them
right.
doing their art. Yeah.
No, yeah, no, that's super good. I'm appreciative of your input. Um, MJ,
Yes,
let's talk to you now.
here I
We
am.
will.
Yes.
Yeah. What can you tell me? Okay, like why don't you just briefly say the background and like maybe how you like your background and
Ooh.
how do you find things that work for you authentically? Because you know, I'll let you talk about your background and you can speak to I don't want
Background
to speak
as
more whatever.
in like
Well, just
civil
say like
Stuff
stuff or
behind
work
you.
or over here.
Your
Yeah, I
Zoom
mean,
background.
I'm just curious because one thing about this whole that we kind of see a lot in menswear. Maybe I get it more because of just how long I've been doing this, but it's like I never like the fact like, oh, I can't do this because that's not me or because I'm not you talking to me as like and it seems to me like I'm like on this weird other level.
Uh-huh.
But that's why I want if you could share about your background and then how you find things that work for you authentically or what you
Mm.
think authentic mentor means to you, I think that would help
Right.
show people that you can do it no matter what your background is.
Well, I
right?
think
You
because
can do it.
I used to be one of those guys where it just didn't care very much. Like I was never one of those guys that was like, oh, I could never do like what Ethan does, or I can't wear like, you know, I can't think that hard about my clothes or stuff like that. And then I don't know. I don't know when I can't pinpoint when like it clicked, right? That was like
Well, you're not a person in general who thinks, "Oh, I can't do that." That's not
right.
me, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like, I forgot to do this morning, but I wrote an essay on who I think the blog is for, and I specifically, mention you and MJ, sorry, MJ and Adam
So
Yes.
everyone else,
as
fuck
like,
off.
It's for me and
yeah,
only
Something to
me.
write
as like the
for those two people.
Yeah,
And the
reference.
entire blog
Well,
post is
'cause
like, why are you reading this?
You
This
put
is
a
not
password
for
on it.
you.
Incredible.
yeah, it's not for Berkeley breeds.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, it's kind of, it's for people who kind of get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you find things that work for you, and you think, okay, I like this, and you make it work?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think going off of like what Matt was saying and like David in the chat said details, details, details. Like you find, or for me, I started to find like particular things that I thought were cool, and then that kind of just, you know, it just keeps opening more doors for you to find like
Right.
more cool stuff.
Do you have to rationalize
Um,
it though? Like, I guess, like, do you ever think this makes sense, or does that thought process ever apply to you, or is it purely based on just like I like it? And maybe that's enough. Like, especially I talk about in the podcast. Sometimes if you just like it, you'll like make it
yeah,
work, right?
I mean it's a little bit
Yeah.
of both, right?
Mhm.
Like I know we kind of like go back and forth between um I mean there's kind of a crossover with slouch in this
Yeah, there's
episode or this
also
topic,
crossover with
right?
like
Um
practicality and POV. There's a lot that kind of
Yeah.
yeah,
goes
because
into
you
this.
kind of like I don't know, at least for me I feel like it was easy to kind of go right into like wear and forget, or like find the cool things and then like wear and forget, right? um
Right.
there wasn't like a oh no, am I like doing this right, or like can I like
Because did you feel
can I
you'd
wear these
done the
things
work
together?
basically to
Yeah.
find out those details, and then once you did, you're like, okay, I'm set.
Yeah, I also think
Well,
you know, a small tangent, that's kind of like how I am as a person also. um like whether it's buying like I don't know, new shoes or like a new piece of like technology or something, I don't just like, you know, buy whatever and then it's like, now what do I do? It's like I kind of like figure out what I would like if I already had it, what like I would use it for, what I would wear it with, or what I would wear something to do, you know.
And then
um
as you wear it, you find new things along the way, and that's all fine. But it's you don't
yeah,
find yourself just like, what do I do with this after buying it, and if you're not thinking about it, that's not what you do,
yeah.
right?
um so there's that. um uh what else do you want to know? I mean,
I don't know. Maybe we'll get into. I know Henrik wants to talk about something, so let's
yeah.
Yeah.
maybe having him say his.
Well, really
his point
quick,
here.
I mean, yeah, I think what, like, something that MJ kind of touched on is what's important to have is just like, a little bit of confidence in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which can be tough when you're starting out. But yeah, when you're purchasing something or whatever, the thought in your head should be, oh, I'm gonna look, sick as hell wearing this,
Yeah.
not like, oh God, I really hope I can make this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Henrik can go. Let me think for a minute.
All
Go
right.
ahead. Okay. All right, Henrik. Here we go.
No, you can hear me now, right? I think I
Yes.
fixed my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. I gotta sit outside. So I'm actually
Ah,
someone
famous
exiled from the
ambience.
apartment. Yeah, gunshots.
Oh no.
Oh, go ahead. I know
no.
you have a point about POV
Yeah,
and
yeah.
authenticity.
This is a suggestion, at least the way I think about authenticity, right?
Sure. Yeah.
There is a difference between what you guys call like a POV and authenticity. I think they're related, of course, but there is, for me, for authenticity to make sense and not being
Yeah.
like just like a kind of like a shell game of sorts, which it could be. There's nothing exactly wrong with that, but that basically it has an objective dimension. It has to have some sort of anchor outside, basically what you
That's
have
true.
yourself
That's true.
chosen.
You're right.
That can be, cultivated, researched, and given weight to in many different ways. But it's a little tough to just come up with to come up with. And you mentioned like Peter Zottolo, that guy. Like for him, like
Yeah.
he has like kind of big into his Italian heritage and Italian tailoring. I think sort of grew out part of his his annual trips to Sicily or whatever.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So it wouldn't be the same thing. It wouldn't work that way if he didn't have that Italian background sort of to make that stick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it wouldn't be
That's a good
the
point.
same. It wouldn't come across as authentic, at least to him subjectively. It wouldn't really work without that anchor.
Right.
And that's a much more sort of, so there is like, that's what authenticity sort of means. It has like the same meaning as authority, and says it comes from somewhere else.
Yeah. That's
It
true.
has like
That's true.
a weight that you sort of, it's kind of like a check on possibilities in a certain sense too.
Right.
It's something
Well,
that sort of pushes against experimentation in a certain sense, but can encourage it in a different way. It is like a
Well-
counterweight to like the possibilities of the POV. Or do you
Right.
not think so?
No, I think I am starting to agree, or the overall like distinction here, because maybe my mode of thinking is that your POV is authentic to you, but you just have to really think hard about what that is, right? Like I'm sure, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't speak for Peter, right? Because on paper, it could still technically make sense. You like heritage stuff. You want, you want the tailor stitch, American menswear stuff that you can wear to work that looks nice and is made well. So maybe you just like the ideas of tailoring, and so like, well, I don't want to just wear a few suit. You want to go, if you're doing that same attention to detail that you're also doing in your work, working with your hands, maybe you want that with your tailored stuff. And of course, if you do that and you find out the background, family stuff and this grandfather and all that kind of stuff, so then it starts to make sense. And so, I'm glad that authenticity kind of comes after POV, because I really do think that a lot of this stuff is tied, like you said, like there is some kind of like authority that you've kind of created for yourself that maybe some people kind of forget, or they discover it on in finding what their POV is, because it's like we've talked, I think, with Kiyoshi, or when we did that POV thing, it's not just about like cosplay, right? It's not just about finding like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. It's more
Yeah.
like what you can do it because it makes sense, and that making
Mhm.
sense part is the authenticity.
Yeah.
But
I think it's. I
if you're-
think.
yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I think I don't think we necessarily say this in the episode, but yeah, I think there could be. I don't know. I think the whole authenticity thing could be a kind of pushback against maybe some of our arguments that you can wear whatever you want. Like sometimes
Yeah, it's us being conservative a little bit
it's
now.
like sometimes you have to figure out like there's some things you shouldn't wear, and I think I've done that. Like like I've said, I think I said this in the authenticity episode, or if not in the merch episode, which again coming in like a week or two. But yeah, I've stopped wearing things that have like logos or something with anything I'm not connected with, just because even though I think the graphic design or whatever looks cool, I just don't like it anymore. I just think it's tacky, and so it's like I kind of want to wear like an FFA jacket because I think that's really cool, but I'm not in the FFA. I'm not a farmer, and I don't know anything about farming, so I'm not gonna wear it.
Well, the
Yeah.
funny thing about authenticity, sorry, Matt, it's just, I mean,
Yeah, nothing.
it's one of those things where if you're not exposed to it, just just like we said about like with Peter and his family and everything, it's like maybe it just wouldn't have been an issue at all, right? Like
Yeah.
because there's lots of guys out there who wear FFA jackets, right? We've seen
Mhm.
people on Throwing Fits to it. We have our friend Adam, and if you, just like with Button Pocket Harmony, if that is not a thing tied to you, it's gonna free you up, right?
Yeah.
And authenticity, really, I think, it's about self-awareness in a sense, right? Like, what your context is, what your aspirations are, what your roots are. And the more you know about it, it can seem like the harder it is to wear certain things. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's what that's entirely the point, because like we said, like, now maybe you shouldn't like wear everything, right? Like sometimes it just doesn't jive. And if you're able to know why that is, I think it makes for a better like overall experience. Like now
Mhm.
Spencer can still wear merch from other things, or brand stuff from other things. It's not that he just doesn't, it's not that you don't like brand stuff at all. It's that you have to find
I
out
want
what.
some connection. I want something that like feels real.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt, what were you gonna say?
Right, Spencer, if you learned about farming, would you go back to the jacket?
Oh, there you go.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
You know?
So
And
that's
it's like,
open.
you know,
You're
it's I
leaving that
also
open.
feel like a hypocrite because I still wear milsurp all the time, but I feel
Oh, that's
like
not good.
I never
And
try
you
to
hate
look
the
like a
military.
troop. I try
Yeah.
I
We
like
steal
wear
valor.
I mean, it's like I like,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like I dress like a guy who shops at military surplus stores,
I
which
think
is what I'm trying
we've
to
talked
look
about
like.
this idea before. This
Yeah.
idea, is it cosplay? It's
Yeah.
like inspiration. So that's another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, this hopefully this kind of informs maybe what we talk about, like the difference between it. And I think we tried to get into it a little bit, or I try to say it in like the essay. But of
Mhm.
course, I mean, there's just so much
There's a
of
lot.
the different points they're trying to make,
There's a
right?
lot.
But I truly think like, and I I truly think that authenticity is what keeps it from becoming cosplay. Again,
Mhm.
it really just takes how as much as you know about
It's
yourself,
the
right? Like,
external framing device that I think Henrik was talking about, where
yeah,
it's
absolutely,
outside of
yeah.
POV itself. It's like, what is your context, etc.
Right, because when you look at guys, I think like I mentioned, like like some of the IT managers that we see like on in Cellform a couple of times, right? Like you see like Bespoke Wrinkles works in IT at some place, and he wears Steed Bespoke, and he has Drake's ties, and it's really great. Like, on paper maybe it sounds like it's cosplay, like, oh, he's trying to, it makes no sense for him to get into it, but maybe that's when the social media aspect happens, right? Or how much you share, because that can help fill in the gaps.
Mm.
And that's something. I mean, this is again a little off topic, but like when in the essay about like who I write for, it's like I feel this kind of need to always provide as much context as possible, because I know people are and it's already happened. We've already had. I mean, for years, Spencer and I have had people like, "Oh, where do you guys wear this?
Hmm.
Where is this for? Like, how can you like what do you guys do for a living, right, or whatever?"
What would
And
the sad primer look like? Just a big. It's either very big or very small. I'm not sure which.
yeah, it's just I'm always saddened by people who just don't think that you can just wear clothing, and it could be like we don't operate on authentic until proven otherwise. It's always like, well, it's not authentic, prove to me that it is,
Right.
which is a weird way of approaching anything, right? Like, oh yeah, you're it's the same thing about like, oh, you're a gamer, name 10 games, or
They're already
whatever.
coming into it not open-minded, and this is a thing you really have to
Yeah,
have an open mind for,
absolutely.
or
And
learn to have.
yeah. And it's just really unfortunate, but like, the issue that authenticity has is that it'll only happen with how open you are with sharing people about it, right? And not everyone, like we said with the social media episode, or lifestyle, it's like not everyone wants to share everything, and it's totally valid. But you're gonna kind of run into this kind of a thing where people are going to be at odds with you with your choice, you know?
MJ,
Um,
was that enough time to think of your answer?
Kind of. I mean, it's like what can I add, right? I'm
I don't know, I
just
mean, you could just maybe
I'm
talk about.
combining.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, talk about, maybe we could talk about your experience with like, with it, and maybe how you think something is authentic, like, do you think that there's some kind of root there that
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, this is why I feel this way, or why I like something or why I don't like something.
Well, to kind of counter what Spencer brought up earlier about how this kind of contradicts wear whatever you want. It's still kind of wear whatever you want, but you're wearing it for you still, or in the end, right? Um,
Hmm.
to quote
That great band.
the great band Style and Direction, um, the episode, um, it's authentic if it's
If
authentic.
you like
Like
it,
if you like
yeah.
if you wear it it's authentic. Like if you choose to
I
wear,
mean, yeah, because
um,
you're not gonna know why you like everything, right? Like at some
right,
point, it is gonna be like,
it's just
you know,
cool. Yeah, right.
it's just cool.
Um,
Yeah, like yeah, maybe your grandpa wore it, but sometimes you just love that look, right?
right. And then there's kind of like the thing where, um, like we kind of touched on it, like where do you work or like what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Um, like that's that still also plays kind of a role, how we kind of like go back and forth where like it makes sense to like wear a certain thing, or we're able to still wear like a certain thing in certain jobs, but also um like we can't really wear whatever we want to certain, you know what I mean?
And the dynamic from contrasting that, sort of the off duty, whatever that means to you, because you might
Right,
work in the industry, you might work out of that industry, and how does that change your on duty versus your off duty? Or
right.
does it bleed together?
And yeah, and how like even within like certain borders, I guess, or certain boxes,
Bookstores?
you can, yeah, you can still be like you, or still dress like
Hmm.
you without like, oh, you're just wearing this because you know you work at it, you work at a desk job, or you work a tech job. um
Right. Bring your personality to it. Yeah.
yeah. And personally,
Well, I mean,
that kind of brings a little bit to, well, I don't know how much it relates to the topic, but um the whole like tech bro, like
oh yeah, can't
uh
yeah.
like archetype, um that, I'm not saying that I'm gonna be the one to kind of break it, but like I'm not gonna continue it. I'm not gonna continue it, right? um Same thing for all the gamers out there. I know this is Twitch.
Absolutely.
The gamers have to be watching us, all four of you. Um,
Yeah, we love the gamers out there.
we love the
I work
gamers.
with gamers, you
Yeah.
know.
That's crazy.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's what was I gonna say about it exactly? It's just knowing knowing that you like something is it's something that I think should be embraced, right? But um, it's just kind of yeah, it is just kind of sad that like some people just can't think in that way, or they can't. Um, it's not just closed minded because it's one of those things where you just haven't met enough people who do that thing, right? Like
Mm,
the thing with authenticity is that if you could just like meet people who dress authentically, who don't just dress up, um, like in their work uniform, of course you're gonna think that everything that you wear has to be not practical, but like serves a function in a sense, and
hmm.
it can't be tied to aesthetic taste, you know,
Are the
and something
people
I'm
who don't care about clothing yet? There's that switch where they do start caring, and then they are, once they're conscious of clothing, then they might be less authentic than they were to start. But if they just didn't give a shit and were wearing like joggers and
right.
t-shirt,
I
is
mean, yeah,
that
I mean it's
authentic?
well, I mean, I think we kind of touched upon this, where it's like, oh, you get into tailoring, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, how does workwear fit into it, right?
Yeah.
Because workwear is more casual, it is going to be inauthentic in comparison. But that's why I think authenticity is also kind of like slouch, where it's loose, right? It kind of means whatever you want it to mean,
Hmm.
in that sense, right? Where I think that if you try and define authentically too narrow, you're going to set yourself up for
Yeah, and I mean, you can
problems.
as we've said before, there can be like an aesthetic through line with your casual stuff and more like dressed up stuff.
Hmm.
Right? Yeah.
So even if you are a suit guy, I think you can wear casual looks that are still authentic to you if they still have that aesthetic through line. You just kind of have to
Yeah,
find
and
what
and
that
your
is.
and your gut will probably tell you
Yeah,
what that is, right? Like that's why all of our jeans, or at least most of us, is going to be high waisted, right? Because if we
Right.
like high waisted pants, it's going to fit in naturally. Because if
Yeah.
we wore low rise jeans from I don't know, like PacSun or something, like of course we would feel out of place, right? Of course it would feel like this isn't like us. We'd feel like we're doing something that we
Sagging.
just don't want to do, which is
Right.
crazy
Oh.
because we have a friend Austin, in
oh wow.
a Gentleman's Avenue, and I've been friends with him for a long time. And I remember like one of our first conversations, we had this typical mentor stuff of, oh, what would you never wear? And he goes, oh, jeans, 100%. And at this time, I was already kind of getting to workwear, and I'm like, well, I mean, Levi's 501s, like they have close to a similar rise to like a trouser because oh they're too casual, and then I see him like with like a high waisted like boot cut kind of he's in Texas, he probably found some vintage Wranglers at the thrift store, and I'm like, see, you just gotta find what that is,
We
Trying to
always
be
constrict to start, where it's like, oh, I'll
right,
never do that,
and
but then you
and
learn more and then you find it, which is still
absolutely.
you.
I mean, and I think maybe not. I don't think everyone's closed-minded. I think it just takes that ultimate thing of like, oh, this unlocks that potential for
Right.
you. Because I do think maybe early on, Spencer and I would define authenticity maybe. Well, no, because there is a quote from me 6 years ago where I say good style is not tied to particular items or formality levels. So I already knew what was going on. But if that's how people define their style, like, oh, I want to be put together, like, I want to be professional, like that's already gonna make it pretty hard to expand on because looking professional kind of has like very narrow views, kind of, right? Or at least because it's about being what's appropriate to work. Um, of course, as we talk about, well, not yet, you haven't heard it, but as we talk about in the corporate one, it doesn't really matter sometimes what you wear to work. Um, but there is that idea, if you just say, "Oh, I want to look like the guy I look like in my head," you kind of setting yourself up to be as vague as possible. I know Berkeley Bree doesn't like being vague, but everything that I did is kind of in that vein. And because Spencer and I are very careful about putting ourselves into a box because we know eventually we're gonna like something else. Like we don't want to we don't want to be like, oh, 70 suits are all bad, even though we kind of said that earlier. But it's kind of cool. Like we knew that we kind of were into it, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we can't wear loafers because they're too casual. Like what about like we were gonna wear lace ups and then we're gonna wear spectator shoes when things are a casual fit. We didn't subscribe to that completely, but there were inklings of that where if we just kind of had a loose definition of it, it makes sense that with okay, maybe a loafer does work for this and we do like it. But I'm really curious now about talking about more about lifestyle and how things are authentic that play how clothing plays into it. And maybe not lifestyle, but just like the life that the life that you lead, maybe the things that you like to do. Um, and I really want to talk to Marco if he's ready or if he's down to talk because that style forum comment, it's so crazy that he got this really
Oh
awful
yeah,
comment
that
where
was nuts.
he's wearing this Marco's wearing this outfit, and this guy was like, "Well, you look like a hippie who does coke on the weekend." And I don't know why you want to look like that. Also, you clearly have more money than you claim because your background, like you have better clothes than your background suggests. I mean, I've been to your house. I feel like it's totally fine. It makes sense, Like there's, it's such a weird thing, but people tend to want to, you know, tie
Well,
this idea. But I mean, yeah, I'm curious if you could just talk about that for a little bit.
yeah, there's well, nothing wrong with being thought of as a coke dealer who does it
No,
for
we're all
I
attention.
mean,
laughing
yeah, I
about
was
it.
gonna
I
say,
mean, like,
yeah.
I was like, shit, that's high
Like that.
praise, man.
Oh.
Thank God I'm not doing that though. Um, but no, I mean, I think like folks are going to put you into a box as you experienced that, Ethan, with
Yeah, of
kind of
course.
like Berkeley breathes. I think everyone here on this chat has felt that at some point in their life, especially as we grow older too. Um, People will try to put us into a box,
They
and
assume things about the authenticity of it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's, you know, I'm not, I'm never gonna like knock on someone for mentioning that or saying a comment. It's either a lack of knowledge or they want something to make sense to them that they don't understand. And I think for folks like us who are sponges, who are open to evolving and changing our reference points, but keeping them as anchors, like what Henrik said. When you keep those as anchors and you improve on your perspective, like your authenticity is going to look very different
Right.
down the road. Like it used to be a barber jacket and like Red Wings for me because I just
Right.
wanted to
Yeah.
fit in when I went to college in the Northeast. And then authenticity later on just became like capital raincoats because it just made sense. It was utilitarian, and I was like on these discords, fresh out of college, and now it's just I don't know. It's just it kind of just becomes everything, right? Your hobbies blend, um, your life like kind of blends as well. So I think what would inform authenticity for me would just be knowing that like I could like put something on, and I'm just gonna forget that I'm actually wearing that thing. Um, what helped me, I think, when I moved out of San Francisco, which was a very small city.
Mhm.
We can talk about tech bros in a little bit, MJ. I have
Yeah.
my feelings about tech bros, but
Right.
it was just like its own bubble. It's like
Hmm.
Right.
how do you break or burst out of a bubble that looks the same every weekend? And that's why I moved to LA, because I just didn't want to live in a bubble. Um, I feel like that gives a lot of power for people who are trying to find their style, who are actually like trying to find like a life that's authentic to them. Like you have to like find that glass ceiling, which is your bubble, and like break out of it.
Mhm.
And I think that just like makes life more colorful, and then that makes I don't know, like adds that slouch to your outfits. That was a lot of thoughts, but no,
Yeah.
I love a good
No, I
guiding
mean
question.
that's a good point. I mean, again, it takes a lot of like kind of, as Kyoshi said in the chat, which we'll get into in a little bit, about introspection than just aspiration. It's not just about, I think POV. I think maybe that's a distinction with POV, right? Like POV is like who you want to be to other people, and authenticity is who you already are, right? And that's kind of like the guiding, like those two things maybe fight against each other, because you can aspire to be this cool writer guy, but maybe you are just,
Because you're
you
not
know
that person that you want to be in the
not yet,
POV.
or
Yeah,
yeah. And the thing is with that is like, sometimes you are that person, but like, it's kind of like an imposter syndrome thing, or not
right,
imposter syndrome, but like,
Uh-huh.
you're kind
You're
of, you're
reconciling
fighting
with
that.
the reality.
Exactly, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
like I could want to come off as a photographer, but like in my head, I'm like, I'm not Jamie Ferguson, I'm not whatever. So in my head, I'm like, I'm not exactly there yet, so I can't really use that moniker, but it at least guides me in what I want to do, and that is authentic because I still do that activity, and therefore that activity still informs how I dress. You know, so it could be
It's a
loosely
struggle
because
Yeah.
carving out your own identity throughout your influences, and it's something you
Hmm.
always have to check in with yourself. Am I
right,
actually being
yeah.
me, or am I just doing
Hmm.
this thing I saw? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
hard.
and
So,
we've. Oh yeah, go ahead, Marco.
oh yeah, I mean, I was just gonna add to what Matt said is that, just because you're in a hobby, just because you're in a scene, it doesn't just mean like you become that
That's
scene.
not your
Like you
personality,
can
yeah.
aspire, yeah, you can aspire to it, but you find the right
Yeah.
people in that scene, by talking to other people. Like I jokingly say like, yo, I jokingly say that when um, my friends say like, "Oh, yo, they're checking you out and your bike," is like they really should not approach me because if I open my mouth, like I'm gonna like scare
You're
them
gonna,
away by like
yeah.
my belching laugh or like, I just like have these like big arms and like weird facial expressions I make when I'm like meeting someone new. It's just like, yeah, I'm just like a mess. Like I'm not cool and composed like what they think a biker would be. I'm just I'm just like
But
me.
that's your authentic you.
Yeah, and that's why like the aspiration point that you mentioned is a great delineation from authenticity. Like aspiration can be a reference point when you're starting
Right.
out, but then authenticity is your POV, your truth that
Mhm.
applies to that
Yeah,
aspiration.
yeah, definitely. I think those two things, at odds with each other as a constant struggle, are what prevent cosplay from happening too much. I think, you
Right.
know, like, if you're aware that this aspirational thing is something that you're working toward, but like you're still not entirely there yet, then you won't be too, like, you won't go there too much. Like, yeah, you might want to be like Gatsby, but if you dress exactly like it, like that's cosplay. And we need to have a cosplay conversation at some
You
point.
say old sport all the time.
Exactly. And what's the difference between you really love saying it and you're just trying to be Gatsby, right?
You're
Do we
hitting your
want to
marks in
be
a creepy
Borat?
way.
Um,
Right, no.
Before we get to Kyoshi in a second, I do want to mention what Marco was saying about finding this kind of tangent that we went on. It reminds me of a friend of ours who, when we were talking about trying new things, the whole thing kind of hinged on, well, this is not me. And the reason why that was such a big deal was because when you're looking at this authentic person, if you have that idea, if it's clearly formed, I can see the appeal in not wanting to deviate from that course. Like there's like I don't think it's exactly a tech bro idea, because I mean this person is not a tech bro, but it's very clear that you don't want to do anything that will that is not in pursuit of maybe not just the ideal, but of your authentic self. And that was so interesting to me because it was like trying to speed run something. It takes kind of like the artistry, or just the simple fact that mistakes can happen, right? Like, and I think a lot of that is into it, because seeing a mistake rigged fit as something bad, as something completely bad, is the wrong way of looking at it, because it at least gives you data on what didn't work. It'll still it'll reinforce what you like, and you won't really know it until you get there, right? And it's not the same thing as just laying out outfits or putting a grid, or starter pack, put everything that you all these outfits, these pieces of outfits into like a white background or a spreadsheet and saying, well, that doesn't work, right? Like sometimes you just gotta try it out. But when you're trying to game the system like that, it I don't even know if that's authentic, because authentic stuff, like if you really like the piano, you're not gonna say, well, I have to do everything perfectly, right? Like you're gonna practice, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna maybe even play a piece that you didn't like, but at least it'll tell you what you enjoy playing, right? At least it's not that. It sounds like a very like failure is just winning in disguise or something. I don't want it to come across like that.
The best
But
teacher.
it's
Because
still
failure, let's be clear, it's bad. If you fail at something, you should immediately
You
quit.
suck.
Never try
Right.
again.
Give up.
Burn all your clothes with
Yeah.
a
Do
ripped
it.
fit.
Call it a loss.
We'll open it up to Kyoshi, but I just want to reiterate that it's like this is a journey, and the idea of setting this is what I will wear forever. Probably now the time span for that might change, but you probably won't wear that forever. But everyone's thing is different, and so you might find a thing you're settled in for. It could be 2 months, 2 years, 2 decades, and not go that long until you change or evolve. But hopefully the idea is we all evolve, and we're all on these different journeys that we all figure it out. And I just don't think these things are set in stone.
that's actually funny, because I mean I got to add it to the schedule, but the idea of archiving your own clothing, or keeping your clothing, is a good topic
God.
for that reason. That idea that yeah, we are changing,
I like the
but
idea of
sometimes
keeping. It's almost like Batman's cape. You just show off all the clothes. Well, I don't wear this anymore, but I still have it. Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, and there's a reason why you do that. Sometimes it's authentic, sometimes it is just so personal to you, but your taste changes.
Right.
And it's like just like I mean, like I said, like there are times I brought out stuff that I thought I wouldn't wear, and then I'm glad I kept it, because I still
mean,
find a way
yeah,
to
that happens.
revisit
This is maybe my most bougie quality, but I really like the idea of having just nice things just around.
Sure. I don't
For
think that's
example, I like
uncommon.
the fact that my beater jeans are like LVC, 1873s, rather than just some pair of jeans I got at, Kirkland brand that I got at Costco, whatever. And so, yeah, I'm sure that's something, if we do this archiving your own clothing episode, I'm
You
sure
are
that's something
living
that'll come
in a
up.
We
material
are gonna
world,
do it.
Yeah.
and you're just a material girl.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, Kiyoshi, let's have you on mic now. Let's talk about your point here. If you want to restate it for the audience. And again, audience, if you have any questions, if anything, let us know here. We'll read it out loud. There's not a lot of you, but it's fine.
Bloody Sunday.
Take it, Kiyoshi.
Okie dokie. Yeah, so basically like something I was thinking about, like authenticity, and
Yeah.
what's the difference between that and what actually makes something authentic to you versus, because it's still the same act of wearing clothes, right? In this context.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's like I go back and I think of when I first started getting into, generically speaking, dressing better, right? And for me, it was my first, what I felt like, real professional job where I had to dress up and look nice. I was working in government, and the whole reason why I started wearing jackets and ties was because I was young and I was mistaken for being an intern, and when I was actually staff, and I realized like I didn't dress the part. And so like at the time, I was into just like, baggy khakis and cargos and polos. That was like my business casual dress. And I would like reluctantly put on, whatever Men's Warehouse suit I had. Um, that and like whatever tie and shirt I just happened to have. I wasn't really thinking about it. And that was, at the time, that was a very authentic Kyoshi. Like, does not give two shits about clothes. Um, just there isn't anything going on with it. But I eventually wanted to not be seen as that, and I wanted to be seen as someone else. A different version of Kyoshi, a more professional version of Kyoshi, a more Republican staffer version of Kyoshi.
Yeah.
So, so that is like the whole image. I took like the image of what I thought that looked like and started buying clothes to become that version, or at least what I thought that would be. And that, to its credit, that gave me a goal, a way to dress, a way to um, something to target about how I wanted to look. And that led me to learning more about clothing just in general and all the rules and, best practices or whatever you want to call it. But um, even when I got to a point where I was dressing as, that version of myself,
Right.
I never stuck with it. Like that is not how I dress today. And I probably said in the Discord and maybe on stream, like I have very little interest in dressing. I have a very growing, diminishing interest in dressing at all related to prep and Ivy and that very early ways I dressed. And I think that's because that as I've thought more deliberately about clothing and more deliberately about like who I am, what I like to do, who I like to surround myself with, um, how I want to spend my free time and my professional time. That is not a version of me, and that's a version of me that, I guess goes to the archive. And in my case, I got rid of all that stuff for the most part, sold all of it, or donated, or what gave it away, whatever. So, um, I think, and that only came about by analyzing who I was and trying to bring my interest in clothing now and align it with who I was, rather than try to become a person or mimic an idea of someone that would make others kind of have a certain impression. And rather than just trying to find the person inside of me that I genuinely am and bringing that forward and out. So that's kind of where my point was of like, authenticity comes from introspection rather than aspiration. Um, it can maybe start with aspiration. I think,
Right.
I don't think you get into clothing without any aspirational aspect. I don't think you could start immediately at authenticity though. I think it certainly helps you along your journey, but
Yeah.
you kind of have to have something to pull yourself out of where you are
Right.
at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Great point. That's I mean, it's one of those things too. I mean, like you kind of said, right? Like when you get into it, like, I mean, maybe not exactly in your story, but people can get into clothing just for clothing's sake, and then I think at some point authenticity will creep its head in. You know,
Its
it
sly
will.
little head.
Yeah, because I mean, like it's one of those things. Like obviously either, um, uh, money or your job or something will stop you and make you go, well, maybe I don't need all this stuff.
Yeah.
I need to figure out what
Hopefully.
exactly I want to wear, right?
Yeah.
And what I really want to get at for like the last half hour is how important do you think that your job, because I mean we talked about a little bit about hobbies and everything, but like how your job applies to authenticity, because I feel like that is probably the biggest thing, other than like what you do in your free time, that affect how people, or what the perception of authenticity is, and to be clear here, and I think also I want Spencer to mention, to go into this also after I'm finished here, but I definitely don't think I would have dressed this way if I became an accountant. Like, I think that
Mhm.
if everything had panned out, like I already knew. I kind of mentioned this in the corporate thing that you guys haven't read because it's not out yet. Um, but I talk about how I used to, I worked at an accounting firm, and by that I mean like a local family-owned CPA firm in like La Crescenta, which is like 10 miles away. Um, and that was like my first thing of like, okay, I gotta find a way to be toned down. Like it was a time when I was trying to figure out what I liked from menswear. I was starting to get into contemporary stuff. I was wearing Suit Supply along with Banana Republic pants because I knew I could not wear my double-breasted suits, my like the 1930s 40s stuff, even my spear points. I could not wear that to work. I could not figure out a way to do that. And it was an idea too, like Yoshi, of like, I'm an intern. I got to find a way to fit in, because if I want to be, a successful person. Thankfully, I did not pick that as a profession, and I kind of fell into like classic menswear as an industry thing. I worked in the industry for a while, for like a couple of years, photographer, freelance writer, social media manager, and everything, and that kind of unfortunately taught me, right, like, oh, I can wear whatever the fuck I want now because
Mm.
it's just so good now. And because I could wear everything I wanted, it was like, oh, I don't have to wear vintage and I don't have to wear H&M. And it's the opposite thing of like, like where the like, we talk about like the entire freedom of things. Henrik talked about this, I think, in our little in the Discord channel that we had, about, we talk about dress codes and everything, and just because people wore stuff back then doesn't mean they were inherently just because people wore suits doesn't mean that like the people authentically wanted to wear suits. But like this entire freedom thing, by being in a creative, more open career path, it was like, you know what, I can wear what I want, so what I should wear should always be good all the time. I should not feel like I'm defaulting. So that kind of planted the seeds of authenticity. Like, okay, maybe I can wear a spear point collar, but with a wide lapel jacket that has soft shoulders, instead of, well, I don't want to do it period with just a broad shoulder 30s jacket, but it also doesn't go with an H&M jacket, and that's the kind of thing that career or jobs kind of play into when kind of figuring out what's authentic. Because I think, again, I don't think Spencer and I wear exactly everything we want all the time. There is some kind of mitigating factor. Like, there is still social social cues to read,
Yeah.
when we're doing stuff. And something about authenticity obviously is not just about the clothing you're wearing, but it's about what you want to gain out of life, and that's a big thing. But like, sometimes when you hang out with your friends, the goal is to not get a good fit off, but the goal is to hang out with your friends, but all and maybe look cool while you're doing it. So in that particular case, the authentic part is a non-menswear thing, but that will inform the menswear thing. You know, and Spencer and I, we talked. Spencer and I just talked about that when Spencer was talking about his outfit, right? Like, oh, he's gonna go have a beer with a friend. He's bringing a sport coat because and as we said, in authenticity and practicality, it's just practical for Spencer. But like, he's not going full cowboy to this thing. He's not
Yeah.
going full prep. There is that little thing there, right? Just like with me, I could have worn the Panama hat, and this is funny. I was wearing a bow tie that day earlier, and I knew I was gonna hang out with my friends. So I'm like, well, I better bring a change of clothes because I don't want to be the guy walking around Koreatown wearing a bow tie and a Panama hat.
Right.
And that's and it's not that I don't want to, like, I'm not like that guy inherently, but I'm also the guy who wants to hang out with my friends and not feel like too out of place. And I've met people who I guess they have a narrow definition of it, but they're like, oh well, that means you're not being authentic. I'm like, no, I feel like it means I just want to be who I want to be, and
Yeah.
that's pretty authentic, you know. But to go back to the job thing, you know, I feel like as you get older, and as you know you go through life, you meet more people, you know, you start to find out that not everything is just clothes, right? And other things inform that aspect of it, of how you dress, and that could lead to other things, right? Like I want to wear a button-up shirt with a spear point collar. That's a very basic Ethan thing. But if I want to hang out with Spencer and have a beer, maybe the poplin or broadcloth shirt doesn't work. But a work shirt spear point or a denim, you know, chambray will work for that. So that's kind of one aspect of how external forces like your job, like your hobbies, like your lifestyle will affect authenticity. Um,
Yeah,
because yeah, go ahead.
I had just have one other thought because
Sure.
you know about you're talking about like I think the job is like the one part that I think a lot of guys when they start thinking about dressing better, it is related
Mm.
to their career,
Right.
and that is what is kind of the catalyst to get them to think about things. But one thing I always notice, and we have things Capato, who just joined our Discord,
Yeah.
um, and he has this enthusiasm of like wants to create this list. He has a spreadsheet he shared with me about all the stuff he wants to buy and purchase and like build up the whole wardrobe. And you see this a lot with guys that have this enthusiasm. They go on Men's Fashion Advice, Reddit, and start reading blog posts and whatnot, or YouTube videos. Capsule wardrobe, the whole wardrobe, get it all done at once.
Right.
And and I think there's this idea that you're going to do something about like there is some good advice of that I get like what do you actually do for work, what do you actually do for your hobbies, what do you actually do for you know what kind of places you like to hang out, and what are the kind of clothes you want to wear to those places. That's some foundational stuff, but the mistake is to think that once you buy all these things, let's say you make all the lists, you plan it all out, you spend a shitload of money, that is going to be the authentic you and your authentic style of how you're going to dress. You might get lucky, you might bat 100, but I would bet that is not going to be the case for more than 6 to 18 months for you.
Wow. Okay.
Like so many young guys want have this enthusiasm, go to research mode, and I'm like, you have a lot of life left.
Yeah.
Like you think
Right.
the stuff on this list, even if you bought upgraded versions of stuff on this list, right now you got to buy Uniqlo, but tomorrow it's going to be Polo, and next week, or 2 years from now you're going to buy, Cucinelli or something. Do you really think that the same basic core items or ideas are going to be the same authentic you?
Or the
Um,
initiated you're talking about, yes?
yeah, like
Right.
after like 10 years or 20 years or whatever,
Mhm.
like I think that's it's a fool's errand.
Right.
Yeah.
And to say that your authenticity or your authentic style will not change, I think is crazy because
I mean, yeah, it's a very
you're
organic
going to think
thing.
more about it. You're going to think
Mhm.
more deliberate about it. You're going to have lived experiences. Um, you're going to have career changes. You're going to have, new things that come to you. Things will leave your life.
As an
And
ex as an ex list person, I think I've evolved the reasoning behind the lists is not that I will literally get everything in that same like as written per it, but it's just
Yeah.
it just helps like when even now I still consider myself trying to figure things out just in a sea of what do you get and prioritization and when you do make these purchases, getting the thing that hey maybe this will be the most useful as opposed to going in a some sort of linear order that oh, I'm just gonna do all suits. Like, no, then what will you wear on your feet, dear boy? So just like getting things that okay, this is a wise thing to get, and so maybe that was on the front of your list, at least in a tailoring aspect. But okay, now what else? So
Yeah.
that it's useful in that way, but not maybe as literal as people present them.
I think your work can be a good like incubator
Mm.
for your style at large, provided you work with other
Mm-hmm.
people and it's not a uniform that you have to wear. But you can use that as a way to gauge people's reaction, how they work with you, how they perceive you. Generally, they have already hired you and have gotten to know your personality.
Right.
So it's not. It's kind of a safe space in a way. You might get a little ribbing, but like it's a good place to start to discover your authenticity,
Mhm.
Well,
and
yeah.
then take those lessons and move them to other areas of your life outside of the office.
Something that I was thinking about when I was writing the corporate essay again, which kind of leaned more about yuppie style, like, because that's kind of what Spencer and I associate with, like,
For
with
sure.
uh, with business attire, in conjunction with, like, the office, like Men's Warehouse stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously our background's a lot different, but when you talk about being an incubator, like that's why I think a lot of my tailored stuff that is not about like overly preppy. I feel like when I'm wearing like my suits, I feel like it's a little bit on the safe side, and it's because I love a little bit of that corporate incubation period that I had. Like I like near the end of that internship, I definitely started wearing like Spirit Point collars, but with like you know not sack jackets yet, but like more soft, kind of like more contemporary stuff that kind of still showed my spirit and my tight knots and the collar bar, but it's still like safe. And I think some people are scared, like the ribbing part. I think some people are just kind of scared of that, right? And it's kind of hard to convince them that the pursuit of finding something authentic will pay off more than
Yeah.
playing things too safe.
Um,
Like, yeah, Spencer.
well, no, yeah, I was gonna say, related to Kiyoshi talking about the, new member in our Discord, like, what a lot of the advice we've been giving him
Oh
is
boy.
that maybe the most important thing when it comes, I mean, the thing that most informs your dress is the question of what are you doing that day, and what
Yeah.
like what informs what you are like, what are you doing day to day more than what your job is.
Right.
And so, like, like Ethan mentioned, although we both like to wear what we want to wear, I think we also both enjoy kind of like fitting in with our environment and not standing out too much. And
Right.
so I think a lot of authenticity, if you can't necessarily wear exactly what you want, can still come through in terms of like, silhouette and details and stuff like that. So I, first got into dressing up and, got interested in clothing in general through vintage stuff. And even if I don't necessarily do the same period outfits anymore, a lot of those details and stuff are still evident in the things that I wear. Like,
Right.
even if I get a job at like, if I got a job where I had to wear a uniform, say like I got a job at like fucking AMC or whatever, I would still wear the polo, but I would still have like, high-rise pants, and I would wear,
You'd find
my
like some
like
poly dress
Do
pants
you
that you had
find that
to.
coming from like prep school? Well, not prep school, but you know what I mean. Having to wear a
yeah.
uniform in like that, it's carried over to things like that. Like, how can I
I mean,
twist
not
this?
really, because I mean, I didn't wear a uniform in high school when I actually started caring about
Okay.
how I dressed. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I had more stuff that I might remember later on.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things where, like, as Kiyoshi said, finding your authentic style is not going to happen all at once. It's
No.
something that you are just going to have to like live life and experience it
Yeah, there
Uh-huh.
is
and
no
say
shortcut. You can't
and
speedrun it.
and discover what you want. Like, for example, I've talked a lot about how I really enjoy shirts with big breast pockets that include a specific like compartment for pens. And I discovered that because I started carrying pens around, and I have a couple shirts that are like that. I'm like, these are the best shirts ever to carry pens around in. And so now
Well,
I look for that in everything, and it's something
you
that, just kind of discover that you like.
the thing that I learned that I liked unlined collars, like even
Mhm.
before I started wearing OCBDs, was I started to get into the 30s sportswear thing because I didn't. For a while, I didn't have a lot of sports shirts, like because to me they felt very 50s, right? Because I would
Yeah.
hang out with Spencer, and so I knew when you look at 1930s, 1920s stuff, people wore their spear point collars over their shirts, right? Over their jacket lapels, and I learned you can't do that when the shirt collar is fused because it just doesn't look the same way. And when I found out it's soft, I'm like, oh shit! I want every shirt collar to be soft now because I
Yeah.
want the option of wearing it over my lapels. I obviously don't do that now because, like I said before, if I'm not gonna wear a tie, I'm gonna wear a shirt that doesn't require a tie, that doesn't have any collar, sports shirt, t-shirt, whatever. Um, and so yeah, some things you just kind of,
You
you
just
just
have to
kind of
discover.
discover.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of this stuff can be found right by learning the rules and learning the garments of their intended design and intended purpose. But there's an aspect of like forced versatility too, where like sometimes you just kind of make it into something and you kind of realize what works for your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think of something I don't do anymore. I don't know. I mean, I obviously I can't wear period clothing because it just doesn't feel comfortable. It felt too formal, stuff like that, where I wanted to be slouchy, I guess, and that was a big thing where, um, I whenever and Spencer and I would meet people who are like into vintage, I felt it weird to always say like, well, I'm not into this for any swing dancing or old movies. I just happen to like the way the suits look. Like that is
Yeah.
the only reason I'm
And
into
then people
this.
look to you like,
There was
oh,
no like, additional hobby attached to it. You just were in it for the clothes.
Yeah, it made me feel kind of like at odds, and I was like, there's gotta be a way for me to prove this without without me explaining it all the time, and then the blog was born.
Mhm.
I know we have like the last like 13 minutes here. We actually have a surprise guest. Just kidding, not surprise, but I'm
Surprise.
curious
That's
to
surprising.
what our friend All just thinks about authenticity, and that we love his input, especially also as we were just talking about list people. Um,
Leeple.
I'll just do you want
Like
to
Schindler?
yeah. Yeah, Schindler. I'll just. Do you want to come on and talk about authenticity? You don't have to if you don't want to, but let us. You
Okay,
can.
Sean Evans.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'll say hi, but I really didn't know what to talk about. I just thought I'd join in for sort of
Well, no,
distracting
I mean,
myself.
okay. Well, like even if you don't have a broad thing, well, okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think authenticity means to you and how maybe not just try new things, but how do you know what works for you and what doesn't, and if there's a root behind it that you're aware of.
Oh, Christ. Not that I'm really aware of. It's really going back to that off-cited rule of ours, you kind of know it when you see it. I've sort of been in
There's
this
an emoji
environment
for
for a
that now.
while. Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. So useful, isn't it? About damn time, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sort of know when I see it, and having been in this environment for a while, being friends with you guys, and just seeing what's out there, eventually you sort of work out what you like and what you don't.
And
And
do you feel a certain way when you wear it after you've seen it?
well, it feels right, I suppose.
Yeah.
When you see
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
and when you
yeah.
put it on, it feels right.
This hole was
Mhm.
made for me.
Look, as
Oh
I
boy.
said, there's I'm not exactly making any profound statements here.
No.
I'm sort of thinking
It's
of it
okay.
as I go, and yeah, I know when I see it's probably the best I can do. I'm
It's
sorry about
porn. Menswear is
that.
porn.
Sure
Always.
I
is.
mean, we talked a little before about like you want if you have this idea of yourself, you don't want to make like the mistakes of wearing something that is not conducive to that pursuit, right? Of
But
this
it's almost
ideal.
yeah, but it's almost inevitable, right? In all of our menswear journeys, we have plenty of
I'm glad you're saying this
cringe to
now,
look back upon. Yeah,
compared to
it's
like when we first
inevitable.
had this thing like almost a year ago. I think the first time we've talked about this kind of uh
I think I
about
know what you're getting at, but it's I think before I really thought that there was a way to, through intelligence and forward thinking, sort of avoid these mistakes. And
right.
Like I was never at a point where I thought you could absolutely, certainly avoid these mistakes. But I thought there was a really good way to mitigate them or limit them to a significant degree. Where I've changed, how I've evolved is that I think they're essentially unavoidable now. But I was never. But I never. I think you thought that. I think you're implying that I thought at one time that you could avoid all the mistakes, but I never thought that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to a significant degree is a good way of phrasing that.
I still think you should sort
But
of plan out if you can. If you have, like, if you like if you're MJ and you have an Ethan to sort of guide you and make informed decisions for you, and that's ideal. And you can, if you have one, if you can find one, then yeah, you'll probably avoid. You'll actually avoid a lot of mistakes that way.
The real hacks.
But
You just
well,
mean like you
I
mean
will
as a
say,
personal connection or what?
it seems it is. I think it's overstated. Even I think MJ can still make decisions on his own. I am not privy to every purchase he does. Same thing with Adam. Adam is
Oh.
able to. Adam is a good example of someone who literally does it on his own, and I was able to find this weird, like, personal authenticity thing really early, or maybe not early, but rather quickly in a sense. Maybe, and it's because, you know, the thing that happens with this that I find is that the people who kind of get it, or people who can figure out what's authentic and not just use it to their advantage to experiment, but to also, like what Spencer said about finding out what is important to you that day and then finding a workaround around it that still makes sense. Those people, I think, are, I don't want to say intelligent people, but I think people who like to not categorize things, but who are aware of certain things, certain details. And I think that makes it easier. Whereas people who are unfamiliar with certain terms might find it harder. And that usually, again, happens with people not just closed-minded, but just kind of beginners in general, right? Where maybe you think something is just too out there, but you lack the words, but you find it intriguing, and maybe you think, oh, okay, it's Western because of this, and you find a way to incorporate Western stuff because you know you like cowboys, but there's a way to dress Western, like Spencer's outfit, where you wear the boots, but then when you have like jeans on top of it, a sawtooth, but it's like not like an embroidered Western shirt, you're wearing with a sport coat, like it's not the negative connotations that you originally thought it was. Like, but that only comes with being aware of what can work with different aesthetics and being aware of those aesthetics, right?
I agree. Even with your points, I wasn't implying that.
No, I was
I
talking in
thought you had the
general.
hand. Yeah, I wasn't implying that MJ and Adam had no free will and were completely guided by you.
No, I know.
and
I'm just making it clear for the Berkeley breeds out there who might see this and who assume that I hold their hand. Because
Right.
I mean, no, it is
Gun to our head.
a big thing where, if you're gonna figure out trying to do authenticity on your own, it's tough, right? Because I think one big thing about authenticity is you need to bounce stuff off of people, because you're only going to be limited to what your mind thinks of a certain thing, right? Like, oh, for me, I could never have thought about I'd be into like elements of Western stuff, and again, I'm still less than most people, but like until I saw Spencer do it, right? It's kind of like, okay, I need to see it someone else, and then like, you know it's what we talked about last week. It's like, oh yeah, when you're a salesperson, you dress 100% of the company because all you wish is that your customer could at least take 20% of it. It's like you gotta see other people do what you could be into, and then you'll distill what you like from it. And or maybe you find out that it's none of those things.
Yeah, we're definitely in agreement there, and
Yeah,
it's hard. That's why if you're developing your style by yourself and you don't have mentors like Ethan to guide you along the way, people who are learned to a greater degree than the average person, it's inevitable that you're going to make mistakes. I think that's the realization that I've come to in my evolution on this point.
right.
But you can, they can be avoided. It's just that to have the knowledge necessary to avoid them, it's probably unattainable by someone trying it out on their own. Which is why I brought up you and how you've helped Adam and MJ respectively with their style journeys. And I think they have avoided a lot of mistakes. sure they have
I mean,
cringe,
they avoided my
but they have
mistakes.
much less. Yeah, they have much less cringe than you or I, and that's because they had an Ethan to provide a helping hand.
Paved the way.
Well, yeah, I would
So-
say that.
So theoretically, if you had
yeah.
the foresight and the intelligence that Ethan has with his experience as a newbie, you'd be able to avoid mistakes theoretically. But how,
Yeah.
as a newbie, you're going to get the
Yeah,
intelligence to
or
avoid
at
those
least
mistakes?
to your point, the mistakes wouldn't be as bad. Like the worst thing could be like, oh, you bought a beret and you didn't think it was for you, and then you wasted $50, as opposed to you spent thousands of dollars in H&M only to realize you hate it. Like there's definitely a difference between those two things, and
Yeah,
MJ
exactly.
has been able to avoid one of those things. You know.
I mean, did
Yeah,
you guys see that
exactly,
post
And
in
I'm
the
happy with my beret.
Did you guys see the post in the Goodyear Welted subreddit? I think Kiyoshi might have posted this on Discord a while ago.
No, which
But
one?
it was this guy that realized, like, I have spent $10,000 plus on Goodyear welted shoes and realized that I do not enjoy them. It's like not
I
for
hate
me.
them.
That's
man.
it's
Fuck that guy.
Mhm.
that's the
So
yeah
funny.
that's the one we want you to avoid that, you know. And
Yeah.
like and the good thing, like I'll just say, you know, it's not that about having an Ethan. I think it's just about having a community, right? Like Spencer and I talked about this in the community episode, where Abed, no, just kidding, where where you know,
Wild.
for a while it was just me and Spencer going, is this good? And we go, yeah, why not? And then we realized maybe that we're not each other's best person to do this. But then you add in people like, okay, well, we had Blake for a little while, and then we had Algis, and we had, you know, old people. We had what's it called, Derek for a little while, and Zane in the first iteration of group chats, and then we have Young Chomsky and everything. And then all of a sudden you know, kind of build this idea, this community about people who not only have good taste, but they also know you a little bit. And that's something, you know, because that's something that's very important to authenticity, where, you know, maybe it's not like about asking your wife if this is good, but like, you know, finding people who kind of understand what your context is and your lifestyle and your work, and it kind of helps figure, you know, help you figure out what is authentic. And
Yeah.
you shouldn't be, you know, averse to outside input on your outfits. You shouldn't just listen to outside people, but having a lot of input, having discussion is a big way of kind of doing this. And it kind of, you know, when Henrik and Kyoshi were talking about how some things are kind of personal, they have this personal root. Um, being around people who know that about you is really helpful. Because, you know, sometimes you can know your own personal roots, but you can still have bad taste sometimes. Sometimes you could break a purchase, you know. But putting it in somewhere like the Discord or whatever, not to plug it, but you know, it helps.
You
I'm just
should.
It
plugging
helps.
it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's important because, you know, like we said, we have a new member of the Discord. We had like two this past week, but like when we had these new people who join in, who surprisingly hadn't listened to a lot of the podcast, who hadn't read a lot of the blog, and, you know, have to find out what it means to them. You know, I can't imagine what it would be like to do that on your own, you know.
Mhm.
And we can only help, this community can only help as much as you share, right? And we've talked a little about, you know, about social media and everything, but if you can have friends who know the stuff about you and have good taste, you know, it just kind of works out, and it helps you mitigate the mistakes that Aldous and I were talking about, where again it could just be as bad as, oh, I thrifted the shirt and it doesn't really work, as opposed to literally trying a bunch of shit on your own and then realizing that it's just you've wasted money and time into it to an exponentially horrible degree, you know.
Yeah, find
um
friends so you don't loiter around too long at
right
H&M
right
buying suits,
and
essentially.
and that's how you also know it's authentic, right? Because then, like Spencer and I talked about, like when you're hanging out with those friends, the idea about fitting in and wearing a cool fit suddenly goes hand in hand. You know, you don't have to worry about that. And something that we talked about, that I wish that I wanted to bring up with Kyoshi, is one big thing that people don't want to confront is maybe the career that they chose isn't conducive to the life that they want to lead. Right?
Mm.
That's kind of that's a big loaded question, right? But it's like, if dressing how you want to be and having a lot of personality is important to you, maybe you shouldn't pick a career that prevents that. And that's not saying you have to abandon your whole thing for clothing, but it's something to kind of consider when you're getting into it. Where I think the younger people in this group are lucky to have done is to kind of find jobs or find paths that kind of involve a little bit of authenticity about not just what we want about clothes, but about what we want out of life and goals. And those things also kind of, like we said in practicality, feed into what is authentic clothing to us, right? Like it's kind of a fun thing where this approach to menswear or menswear in general is a holistic experience that involves a lot of your life and a lot of your aspirations and your internalized roots and what you identify with, right? And introspection, I should say. And so
Love introspection.
yeah, it's dressing authentically is a big thing, and don't be upset if you can't figure it out right away, because some of us are still doing that. I mean, you know, we can talk about
I think it's safe
trying
to
to
say that
buy.
none of us have completely figured it out. I think we're very along in establishing who we are, and we feel very great, a lot of
Right.
us. But
Yes. Yeah.
we're all we
Exactly.
never cracked the code.
It's a
Exactly. And
process.
I think, and one of those things too is that this idea only comes up when we think about other concepts. Like where POV works as a great metric for buying clothing, but it doesn't really hit the mark. Authenticity helps fill in that, right? Where also slouch also works into it, but then there's some issues with slouch, so sometimes the community aspect fits in to kind of equalize it out, and then practicality fits in. So this whole thing is just an ever evolving, journey that we all have, and you know, if you think about menswear then that way, just like how I said in the podcast, where menswear should not be something that is a narrowly defined genre of dress. If you think about everything with open mind, and that you're going to be evolving and you're going to be trying things out, then you'll just be in a better spot overall, right?
Mm.
So, well,
Nice.
anyway, we just hit on the mark now.
Hey, there it
That's
is.
right, we did it. We're still on time today.
We're
So
crazy.
good.
Sunday
Um,
streams, man.
Sunday streams. We clicked it, man. We're ready for work tomorrow. Um, I want to say a thank you to all of the guests who were able to come on here: Aldris, Henrik, Marco, Kiyoshi, and of course, producers MJ and Civilian Matt. Um,
Yahoo.
this was a really good discussion. Again, I know the chat wasn't as active, but hey, the speakers were active. They're popping the decibels and the hertz, were just going crazy.
Our hurts were
We're,
going
we're
crazy.
peaking.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Pekins. Um, if you guys, I really think that if you guys are watching this, if you enjoyed the discussion, listen to the podcast episode out on all platforms, and read the essay, my own personal take on the topic, on a little bit of rest.com. That is my personal blog. I think you'll really enjoy the discussion, and people on Reddit did too. I wanted, if we didn't have enough time, if we ran out of stuff to say, I was going to read some comments on there, but I think if you just go on Reddit, you'll find it. People upvoted it. It's really nice.
Yeah, that's our plug
Um,
this week. Reddit.com. It's a great website.
It's a great
r
web.
There's
slash
a lot of
CF.
great people there.
You guys should go to it's called r/funny, and whenever I want to laugh, I just sit down there and
Yeah.
I
Do you
just
love to laugh, by the way?
I do love to laugh. I laugh until I
Love it.
cry.